Times are hard, but shall we brace up for the worst? Inflation is skyrocketing. Transportation fares have gone up. The Electricity Company of Ghana has proposed an increase in its tariffs by 148% for 2022, with 7.6% average adjustments between the periods of 2023 to 2026. The Ghana Water Company Limited is demanding 334% increase in tariff. These two important critical institutions say that without the increases, they will not survive. Food prices, everything gone up. Your salary perhaps remains the same. So how are we going to survive this? We interrogate the basis for the proposed adjustment in tariffs by the ECG and the Ghana Water Company Limited. Agyapa. It's been described by John Mahama as Agyaboni. And as you remember, when it came up in 2020, as many as 22 civil society organizations rose up in arms against it. They exposed governance vulnerabilities and risks from the deal. Risks including risk of undervaluation, loss of control over gold sector governance by the state, loss of ability to repay existing loans, limited consultation and questionings on transparency and accountability provisions, and corruption risk. In fact, the special prosecutor then, Martin ABK Amidu, did a corruption risk analysis, and the project failed badly. The government was compelled to suspend Agyapa. The president ordered a return to Parliament for further work. The finance minister promised wider consultations, including with chiefs, the Council of States, and you, the citizen, the owner of the mineral rights, entrusted in the president to hold it in trust for you and for your benefit. Agyapa is coming back. Renewed? How exactly? And why is it again being this vehemently opposed by civil society organizations? I'm Samson Ladi. We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters here on Newsfile. Welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as you know, as always, we put Ghana first. I'm your host, Samson Ladi Anyanini. And this morning, Samson's take, I am back on my subject of integrity. Integrity is not a default value. That's the question I'm asking. Integrity, the quality of being honest, ought to be a habit, a default conduct. It ought to be a human, not black or white, and not Christian or Muslim character or virtue. Don't offer bribe. Don't accept a bribe. Don't tell a lie. Don't cheat. Don't mislead. Don't encourage wrong and unlawful conduct. There's everything wrong with the very fiber of our society if a natural virtue becomes so rare that it is celebrated. But this perverse generation needs teaching and encouragement towards building the character of integrity, like Joseph will do to honor God and Potiphar. The name police may have long been associated with corruption. Well, Dampare is doing a lot about that now. But Detective Lance Corporal Confidence Fiagaji shared the coveted Integrity Personality of the Year Award 2021 with Manasseh Azure Awene. He rejected bribe in 2 separate cases, including one involving his colleagues he was prosecuting for extorting 20 Ghana cedis from an individual. Confidence was surprised he won because he competed with 4 public figures, 2 journalists, 4 public figures, and 4 public figures, 2 journalists of the year prize winners, and 2 famed politicians. If you never read or heard me say a word about my nomination until after the awards night, it was because I felt Manasseh had risked just too much to expose corruption in this country. The lack of integrity among other top public officers was far deserving. He had been previously nominated with Auditor General Daniel Yaodomelevo, who won it. So when family and friends called to tell me about campaigning for votes, and voting was free of charge, I discouraged and told them Manasseh and Confidence deserved it. I don't recall exactly what, but Manasseh had something really inspiring to say about the police officer at the awards night. I was therefore not surprised, but rather overjoyed they both won. I have same joy that we are celebrating taxi driver Isaac Akon for returning a fishmonger's 8,400. In the viral video, the woman and her family cry while thanking him profusely for the rare act. On Ekosi Sen, Philip Osaibonsu, we call him Obi, as he often does for good causes, did not only make a personal donation, but raised over 25,000 Ghana cedis for Isaac. The owner of Peduasi Valley Resort gave Obi 10,000 for Isaac. The cabby had already received 20,000 Ghana cedis from Vice President Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia on being alerted by Manasseh on social media. Many have been giving him money and gifts for this act by Isaac. Isaac says he returned he has returned passengers' phones and other items on 5 occasions in his 7 years of being a cabbie. He actually showed the money to his wife before returning it. He said, "I don't take what's not mine." That declaration sounds like a legal principle we call nemo dat quod non habet. You can't give what you don't have or own. May this be your word and your default conduct. We are naturally supposed to behave like Isaac, or the many police officers we have seen take money and return them to their owners because the money did not belong to them. There are few citizens, a few police officers, few citizens that we have seen do this. It must be our natural default conduct. That's my take. A Newsfile is brought to you by the kindest sponsorship of Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go, Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa, Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care services provider for 31 years. Waylead Properties, home is where one stars. Duraplast, where Duraplast goes, water flows. Trasaco Fast Floors, stronger, faster, and affordable. I will be right back to introduce my guests as we begin the discussion about the hard times and looking forward to tariff hikes, particularly for water and electricity. Transport fares have already gone up by some 20% and expected to go up even more. Food prices are rising. Inflation across the globe is getting terrifying. We'll be right back.
We spent $1.2 billion paying for the under-recoveries in the power sector alone. That is 3 times more than what we spend on social infrastructure, education infrastructure, roads, agriculture, and social protection. It's not sustainable for us to keep doing that. When are we going to get the roads if we are pumping up such money into the power sector inefficiencies? We buy gas from the gas operators. We infuse the price of the gas in the tariff. But the gas price doesn't come out. And the government have to find money from the budget to go and pay for the gas, because of the inefficiencies that are happening. So the power sector and the energy sector in general has become a very crucial, sector for Ghana that we need to resolve as quickly as possible. In 2 years, we had wasted 14 billion Ghana cedis, addressing the power sector problems. And
it's early days to say whether one is okay or one is not okay. The situation is that things have changed. So if these things are going to be put in place, and also if business people, and what does it bring to business, and if people are in a position to pay and they're paying, what are the benefits and so on and so forth. For business, it's difficult. Nobody wants tariffs to go up. But if it's the situation, and if somebody is subsidizing somewhere, and for that matter, we are not in a position to be doing that going forward, I think that we should come to the book and know that, okay, if these are the right tariffs to pay, and for this reason, and for this reason, I think we should go forward with it.
We need to go into the depth of it and see that those increases would be used in such an efficient way that 5 years down the line, we are not back here again. For me, that's where the challenge is. If we are asking for certain increases, look, we didn't talk about the automatic adjustment. They said it's now called quarterly review. If that quarterly review had been put in place continuously, it would stave some of the huge amounts that they're asking for in percentages. But what did PRC say? PSS board wasn't in place, certain things came in, and so for probably a year that hasn't been done. It comes to hurt the ordinary man.
The 1 cubic meter that we are requesting from the people of Ghana is 19 cedis 52 pesos. Okay, that is for operations alone. But if government decides to take other burdens, including our capital investment, then it will go to 25 cedis or 28 cedis. Okay, so 1 cubic meter, even if you take the maximum, the upper limit, it means that 1 cubic meter of water will cost 28 cedis. Ghanaians are prepared to buy at 2,000 cedis packaged water, and they are comfortable. But when it's from the Ghana Water Company Limited at 28 cedis, then they have a challenge. If we want strong institutions and we want the GWCL to serve Ghanaians the way we all expect, then we should be able to prepare. We should be prepared to pay more. Now let's look at the depreciation of the cedi. The last tariff we had as a company was in 2018, and that was 6.9 cedis a cubic meter. As at the time, we are told the PLC that the cost of production was 15.6 cedis. They gave us 6.9 cedis. So since 2018, for every cubic meter of water that we produce, we lose 8 cedis. For how long can the Ghana Water Company Limited live or work like this?
Is ECG broke?
We are. This is a fact. This is a known fact. We are struggling. Look, we are struggling to match the demand for using service connection. People are paid, and we can check. And sometimes the month they have not been serviced. We have some tariffs available, maybe postpaid, and we don't have prepaid. It's a prepaid bill. And this, like you made mention, low-hanging fruit, for example, when the person is ready to pay. So what is the problem? And we can't even, sleepless nights. People call you as if when you want service, you're supposed to know somebody. Something that somebody is paying for. But the meters are not there because they are expensive. It's subsidized. But we are allowed to charge the commercial for the meters we are buying. So we have to get the money to buy, and then still we don't make it. But we can't charge the commercial rates for the meters that we bring it. So these are challenges that we think that when we meet us halfway, we are still at the, have been submitted to the PRC with the proposal, and they look at staggering for the next 5 years. And start picking us now.
Right. Joining me right here in the studio, I have engineer Dr. Clifford Abdallah Brima. He's Managing Director, Ghana Water Company Limited. Joining us via Zoom, Dr. Steve Mantiao, Policy Analyst and Co-Chair of the Ghana Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. Bright Simmons is Honorary Vice President, Imani Africa, and Dr. Eric Obute is Acting Director, Research and Corporate Affairs, Public Utilities Regulatory Commission. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you very much for making time to join us on Newsfile.
Good morning.
Right. Okay, so let me begin with Dr. Steve Mantiao. You've heard the voices we have played from Ali Jarana, PRO of the PURC on the tariffs. You heard Ben Boache on the power sector inefficiency, Dr. Humphrey Ayim Dake of the AGI, and then Kwame Jantwa on the issues regarding Jubilee gas and also speaking on the tariffs. You heard Stanley Mante of the Ghana Water Company and William Boateng also of the Electricity Company of Ghana. People don't know how to process what is about to happen. It does appear it's bound to happen. That the ECG is asking for 148% increase in tariffs. And the Ghana Water Company is asking for 334% increase in tariffs. How should we process these? Dr. Steve Mantiao. Please unmute. Please unmute.
Right, thank you. Thank you for letting me. Yes, thank you. Good morning to your listeners and viewers. And let me begin by saying that the demands that the utility companies are making are generally reflective of the challenges within the larger macroeconomic sphere, such as inflation that is spiraling out of control, a city that cannot stand its ground against our major trading currencies, what do you call it? Interest rates that are falling behind inflation, etc. And for these reasons, government bears part of the responsibility for the unprecedented tariff increases that the companies are making. It is important, however, to note that a component of the inflationary trend, which has fed into this demand, is as a result, in fact, it's imported, is as a result of the supply chain disruptions arising out of COVID-19 effects and the general price increases globally. And so a certain component of the cost that has fed into the demands that the companies are making are imported, and for which reason we cannot hold government responsible. But if government were to manage the macro economy very well, and if our city was to hold its ground against the major trading currency, perhaps the extent of the demand wouldn't be as astronomical as it is now.
Once again, COVID, Ukraine, Russia, war is to blame for all of this?
Well, not entirely, because I've already mentioned that even before Russia and before COVID, the economy was not in the best of shape. And so we bear a certain level of responsibility for not managing the macroeconomy very well. And of course, the Russian conflict and the COVID have only come to compound the situation to the extent that we are now having to deal with such huge demands. For me, what is worrying about the demands is also the fact that once approved, they are also going to feed into demand by workers for wage increases. And therefore, we go into a certain vicious cycle of price increases in the country.
Bright Simmons, what will be your preliminary comments about these impending tariff hikes?
Good morning, Samson. My view is that they are not tenable. We have significant challenges with the proposals that have been made by the regulated utilities. And our analysis suggests that given the comparative analysis we've conducted with other markets in the world, in short, the regulated utilities are having a laugh. They cannot justify the demands that they are making. And we believe that PRC has every basis to begin active regulation. This tendency where it just sits there and requests for quality KPI data as opposed to probe the integrated resource plans of the utilities to establish whether or not the return on equity analysis that they are making is sound, is no longer viable. And if you want me to delve into it to a greater depth, I'm happy to do so.
Right. Let's dive into the deep right away.
So we have to just look at the numbers, right? I mean, ECG has a distribution service charge as a percentage of the end user tariff. So what you pay at the end is an aggregated number that comes from charging you for the for the generation of the power. So Akosombo is owned by VRA. They have a certain cost to producing the power. Then Gridco is owned by the government. They transmit the power to ECG. ECG is more or less owned by the government, and they send the power to your house as last mile distributors. And each of them take a piece of the amount of money that you pay. So if you look at ECG alone, they are getting like 2 point something cents per kilowatt hour that they give to you. 2-point-something cents is really good. I mean, you look at utilities of the same size as ECG in many parts of the world, in Asia and the US and the rest, and they are making do with 1 cent, 1.5 cents, etc. So if you're getting 2 cents per kilowatt hour, you have to be quite inefficient to claim that, you know, that amount is much too low. So we have a problem. Of course, there are factors exogenous to their own operations, which we agree with them. And in that regard, I agree with Dr. Mantiel that we can't blame the regulated utilities alone because there are factors external to their operations that matter. But we still have to look at the numbers. Take the generators, for instance. Take VRA. VRA, not too long ago, published numbers that suggest that its fuel pass-through costs are being borne by the government to the tune of close to $1 billion now. Very soon, the government's share of the pass-through costs, that is the fuel costs and other costs for spares and the rest of it, is going to hit like $1 billion. Now, if you have those circumstances where that is being converted into equity, because that's how they are calculating it now, the government puts in money to discharge some of these obligations. The government assumes, therefore, that it increases equity in the holdings. And we have to ask ourselves, in those circumstances, whether the return on assets calculations that they are trying to suggest, the return on equity suggestions, is that the government, so like for instance, VRA says it should be 11-point-something% return on equity. Essentially, I have a certain set of assets. I need a return to justify those assets. But you don't own those assets. Those assets are owned by the state. And the state doesn't have that same degree of expectation in terms of return on equity. So if those are the circumstances, on what basis do you demand 11% return on equity when you are a state-owned utility and the state is increasing its equity contribution due to the fact that they are paying for your fuel? You're not paying for your fuel, right? You're not paying for your spares. So it's already highly subsidized by the taxpayer. So when they look at when they merely just look at the tariff and they say we are not paying enough, they forget the fact that the government is buying them fuel, the government is buying their spares, and we are paying as taxpayers through that. So in effect, we are paying more than the published tariff. We are paying the subsidy that allowed that power to flow. So we don't accept their calculations. That's as simple as that. When it comes to other dynamics in that space where we've looked, for instance, at how they compute, for instance, the how do we put it? Jesus Christ. They have a way in which, beyond the return on assets, they look at risk as a way of computing the return. So your hurdle rate in that industry. To our mind, a regulated utility that has a monopoly has almost no risk because we don't have retail choice. If you go to the United States, where in about 28 states or so, you have retail choice, people can shift. When they've been confronted with the least competition, they've gone to the regulator and demanded that the regulator more or less cobble and hobble their competitors. An example being the embedded generators. So they say, well, some of these industrial players nowadays are going to private sector operators and asking them to give us capability to generate power, and they don't have our full exposure, so we think you should regulate them even more tightly. That is because they are recognizing that industrial consumers or industrial customers now have retail choice. They can decide not to buy from ECG, in effect, therefore not buy from VRA and some of the other IPPs who are also regulated. But that fact, the fact that they don't like that, tells us a lot. It means that they are not competitive. They argue about energy levies and other things like that, which are somewhat viable. We have to look into that into greater detail. But I don't think when you look at the cost difference between the embedded generators, the operators that are essentially not part of the structure as it currently exists, when you look at their costs and you take out the contribution of the levies and the rest, I don't believe, and the analysis show, that you can account for the difference in cost between they and the regulated utilities purely on account of the levies. So it means that those embedded generators that they want PURC to hobble are fundamentally more competitive than they are. So we need to dive really deep, not just looking at just quality statistics, QoS, quality of service statistics, but into their integrated resource plans. To give you an example, there are power plants within VRA's portfolio where capacity utilization is as low as 18%. And in that same category, like in solar, they are building more. How do you build a power plant where you utilize only 18% of the power plant's output 18%. So it's like you build a factory, and that factory is designed to make 100 what do you call it? Packs of jollof rice. You build a restaurant, and you only sell 18 packs of jollof rice. And despite that, you want to build another restaurant that also makes jollof rice. All of these things makes no sense, and nobody's really delving deep into the way in which they are organized as utilities. Last point, when ECG says that its distribution service charge is low because it inherited it from PDS, and then since it inherited it from PDS, the adjustment has not been made. It goes into this really convoluted analysis about the fact that, oh, you know what, because we have split the assets from the management, the fact that PDS was willing to work with this low rate was because of that distinction. It makes no sense. I don't understand that point. If PDS was the concessionaire and they were willing to work with that distribution service charge, then there has to be a really compelling reason why ECG argues that that charge was fundamentally flawed. So these are some of the issues that we have.
So referring us to the difficulties within the power sector, and we know what is happening because of Ukraine-Russian war and all of that in respect of gas and the rest of them, and the oil industry as well, petrol. Now, as we know, transport fares are already, getting out of control. So you agree that there ought to be some increase, except that what is being demanded is what you term as untenable?
There has to be some increase, has to be based on comparative analysis with other jurisdictions where there is efficiency, right? It's possible that there have to be some increase given that we have a baseline. They have become used to operating with a certain set of numbers. And now that the external environment has changed, inflation is rising, the currency is depreciating, they do buy certain things in dollars, the currency is depreciating, they charge in cedis. Some of those will be justified, given they have a baseline. But I'm arguing that, and definitely on behalf of the organizations that I represent, which is the CSO community, our argument is that we have to do a much deeper dive into their actual operational effectiveness as utilities, as regulated utilities.
Right.
The cost-plus model relies on us delving into their costs before we can think of the plus, right? The return on equity and all of those matters. So we're arguing that the degree to which we have to examine the way they operate is so critical that until we've done that, we have to be very careful just looking at the baseline, assuming that that baseline is fixed. But yes, once we accept the baseline, then we have to recognize that so long as they buy some of their variables, they price some of their variables in USD, and yet still they charge in cedis. If the currency is depreciating, they definitely justify to ask for an increase from that baseline.
Right.
But that baseline is not sacrosanct.
Thank you. We'll have Dr. Brahima justify what they are seeking. We'll have Dr. Obute tell us the processes that will be gone through and what is likely if he's able to see into the end of all of this. But Dr. Steve Mantea, I got really scared when I got the comparison or the example that was made with bottled water, that we are comfortable, we are okay buying bottled water for so much, and we are unwilling to pay, if you like, competitive price for water from Ghana Water Company. That scares me. Hello, Doc. Please unmute your mic.
That's right. It shouldn't scare you. It's a fact of the matter. But you see, because it's incremental in small quantities at a time, we don't buy large or bulk quantities of the water that we consume. So we don't recognize that eventually we are paying much more for bottled water. But you see, and that is the reason we need periodic automatic adjustments. If they were working, then of course, we wouldn't come to the situation where Ghana Water would be asking for 148% increase at a go. And so it's also a failure. I see it as a regulatory failure in not ensuring that over time, now we call quarterly adjustments. If it's going to work efficiently, then we are not going to have a situation where we'll be demanding huge tariff increases at a time. But let me quickly also chip in on something that what you call my good friend Bryce Simmons said about the inefficiencies. While discussing that, we need to pay attention to the fact that certain amount of inefficiency is allowed in utility regulation. In Ghana, I think for water, we allow about 45%. And for electricity, I think we are around 27, 28%. Now, we need to interrogate that and see how that compares with international best practices and standards. In my view, what the PRC calls the regulatory benchmarks, which is the level of inefficiency we are willing and able to tolerate, needs to be reviewed. I think to accept a situation where about half of the water you produce goes to waste is not tenable, and we need to go back to the drawing board and relook at the regulatory benchmarks.
And like Bright says, we need to question a number of things. As we understand, for example, for ECG, the 148% that they are requesting, if that is approved, your electricity bill will not go up by 148%. So that if you pay 300 cedis a month as your water bill, ECG's component is just about 100 Ghana cedis, which is the distribution service charge. And it is this 100 cedis or the distribution service charge that they want increased by 148%. How do they justify that, having listened to Bright Simmons? Hello, Dr. Steve Mantiao.
Yeah, come again, please. I didn't hear the question.
I'm saying that when the ECG says, give me 148%, they're basically asking for distribution service charge. This is like, say, a certain percentage of your bill that you pay for electricity. Now, having listened to Bright Simmons and having heard the questions of waste and issues of incompetence and bad management, how is this justified?
Samson, I refuse to accept the notion that the Ghanaian manager is inherently incompetent. Because I recall from years back, I think 2005, 2006, we experimented management contract in the water sector. We brought in Aqua Rand.
Yep.
And we charged them to reduce non-revenue water by 5%. 5 years into the program, they were not able to achieve that. And we refused to renew the contract. Management reverted to Ghanaians. And the phenomenon that heralded the coming on board of Aqua Rand, which was the Kufuor gallons, vanished. The Ghanaian team was able to reduce water by more than 5% over time. And so I believe that the Ghanaian manager is very competent and very efficient. Sometimes what we are prepared to do for foreign multinationals, we as Ghanaians are not prepared to do for our own. And that compromises their ability to deliver on the mandate that we've given them. So you take even football, for instance, consider how much we pay foreign coaches and local coaches. And again, if you look at Aqua Rand, we gave them a lot of concessions that we're not prepared to give our own ECG, to the extent that they said they were better managers, but we were ready to ring fence all the legacy debt and leave them with a clean table. And what was the result? Of course, there were some in the collection.
Dr. Mantiao's line freezes there, but let me come to the studio. We have Dr. Brahima here to try to understand how they are able to justify what they seek as far as the ECG request is concerned. He is the managing director of the Ghana Water Company Limited. Now, when I said I got scared when I heard the comparison or the example being given with bottled water, that we are ready to buy that and we don't seem to want to buy at similar price from you. Why I said I got scared was that not too many of us can afford bottled water, and not in the quantities that we need water to use. So if the suggestion is that we are going to use that to justify bringing the price to such a level, then the poor is going to be in trouble. Even the rich may suffer. How do you justify what you are requesting?
I don't think that comparison means that the water tariff should go to that level. Because the bottled water, the sachet water, they also have to go through some processes to get to the level. We are saying that you're just comparing and to see what the differences are. We are a public utility owned by the people of Ghana, 100%. And so there are certain expenditure that if they were not on Ghana Water Company's books, can't bring the tariff low. I keep telling people that our current tariff, for me, is one of the best within the sub-region, if you really want to look at them. But what the other, like Bryce Simon is saying, he has equally failed to tell people what those utilities that are performing the way they perform get from citizens, also from maybe the government. Our tariffs historically, not today, historically have been very, very low. And so current requests is an accumulation of things that should have been done over the years. Let me just give you one example. 2013, January, I can remember, I went to Savlugu to look at their system because they take bulk water from Ghana Water Company and redistribute to the people of Savlugu. It was a MEDA project, and so they wanted to examine or pilot such a system. So there was a private operator that was running it. They were buying a cubic meter of water from Ghana Water Company at 86 pesos, and then distributing to the citizens of Savlugu at 2 cedis. And so at that point, I wanted to actually look at what GWCL's records are. If these people are selling it at this level and making good money, 86 pesos, what is GWCL making out of this? Then a story can be told. And if it means trying to separate the bulk production and distribution, then probably a recommendation is made academically at that time. Savlugu is very close to Tamale. So there was a problem. People live in Savlugu and work in Tamale. People live in Tamale and work in Savlugu. So they started comparing their water bills. And so there were agitations. What I'm trying to tell you is that historically, the tariffs were low. But for us as a utility, you don't need to hide anything from anybody. The PURC has a responsibility. They regulate trade strong people. So they are watching over a tripod system. You have the utility, you have government, and you have the consumer. To make sure that everybody is satisfied. Nobody takes advantage of the other. Government is so strong in this equation. And so they are also there so now they are doing consultation. we are saying that we have these cost build-ups. And if these cost build-ups are supposed to be catered for, this will be our tariff. Again, the 300% the media is throwing out. GWCL has 3 scenarios, but we just decided to go to the market with the biggest one. Probably that will create the kind of environment that we want. One, we are saying that if the government policy of 2015 that says that all loans contracted, all grants taken by government to invest in the water systems are supposed to be all lent to Ghana Water Company to pay. And so you have to escrow some money into an escrow account that is controlled by Ministry of Finance and Ghana Water Company. Then they must speak to PURC and get PURC to put a tariff line so that specific amount will be escrowed. And that's what we will use to pay Ministry of Finance. But if there is nothing there, and we are supposed to take money from our operational system, operational cash to do that, it's going to be a difficulty. So immediately, that on-lend loans are taken off, about 6.1 billion Ghana cedis. It comes down from the 300 to about 250. Quickly. We are also saying that the assets belong to the state. But if you begin to on-lend this to us, it's like, yes, you are a company, the asset belongs to you, but the asset belongs to government. Ghana Water Company thought their asset was 2.2 billion cedis. As at 2016 thereabout. When we did re-evaluation of the assets of Ghana Water Company, it came to 17.2 billion. So from 2.2, that we were thinking that's our asset. So if you are looking for any return on your asset, you are using 2.2 to calculate. Today is 17.2 billion. As of 2018, 2019. What it means is that your capital investment costs has gone high. And if it is not catered for, you will continue to run down the systems. We are telling PURC there is a way of debating and working on how to resolve this one if we sit on the table. We are saying that if we take only Ghana Water Company and DISAL, and to be frank with you, all the 3 scenarios have desalination also in there because it's a water purchase agreement signed, Parliament actually approved it. So if we just take GWCL operation alone and then desalination, we come to about 150%. And so these are the 3 scenarios. And we think that, look, let's be fair to the story. Let's give the 3 scenarios, then we can work on it. But remember, VRA is asking for increase in tariff. GRICO is asking for increase in tariff. ECG is asking for increase in tariff. The structure of Ghana Water Company is that we do production, we do transmission, and we do distribution. So the 3 different units that you are seeing smaller, if you had aggregated them, like we used to have VRA doing all, the tariff of Ghana Water Company will not have been seen as that high relative to the other ones. Also remember that the tariff ECG is asking for, it's a pass-through cost for Ghana Water Company.
Meaning what?
We pay, our systems rely on ECG. And we are treated as commercial entity, not a company that is running water for you at a lower tariff. They charge us as a commercial entity. So these are things that we can discuss and bring the values actually down. And so we are saying that if...
When you say bring the values down, you are saying that the 334% demand will come down to about what?
It depends. It can even come to 0.
Can come to 0?
Yes. That's what I said at the beginning, that the current tariff, if some cost elements or cost items are taken away.
Okay.
the tariff are enough. All our debts, those things that were incurred at the time that tariffs were so low, if all those things are taken off, but if we are supposed to do all this, one, most of our systems are over 50 years old. The pumps, the pipes, and most of, if you go to Choco and those places, they are complaining about water because their systems have encrusted. There are steel pipes, and because of the position, all the time, the sizes of the pipe have become smaller. So you can't push enough volume of water through. You have to replace them. And the places have become built areas. If you want to replace it, it's cost. How do you do that? So these are things that when we begin to discuss, then we realize that some of these costs, if they are taken off, one, if our debts overhangs those times, or they call them legacy debts, are taken away, if the on-land loans are no longer on land to Ghana Water Company, if we say that the capital investments are going to be taken care of by the state, all these things will go down.
And what you're talking about,
the citizens.
What you're talking about, is that realistic?
Oh, it's realistic when we sit down. It's realistic. I have, in one of our sittings, told PURC, after all this, we must sit down and look at another innovative way of financing the water supply, because countries are doing it. And we can equally do that, because government has one bowl where they pick money and distribute to other agencies. There are agencies that will benefit when Ghana Water Company is very efficient.
Okay.
And then let me just say the last thing. You see, our citizens are those that pollute our water. So if you citizens take the responsibility not to pollute the water, we are not going to increase the usage of chemical like we are doing currently in Wager. From 200 bags of aluminum sulfate a day, we are now using 300. And that's an increase in cost. And this is citizens who are polluting the environment. So when we do that, so that's why I'm saying that PURC is regulating the three of us. Each of us has a responsibility. Once we take our responsibility up seriously, some of these costs can be controlled.
All right. Dr. Eric Obute, Acting Director, Research and Corporate Affairs, Public Utilities Regulatory Commission. Take us through briefly what the processes ongoing, if they have actually actively started, are like, and what should we look forward to?
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
Hello, Samson.
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, Samson, sorry. Okay, sorry, my connection is not that stable, but if I heard you right, you want me to talk about the processes
that's
we'll
right.
Go through before we come up with the tariff.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. Section 22 of the Act of PURC states that the utility company could come up with a tariff proposal if they need an adjustment. But to make sure that we sanitize the whole process, the PURC actually gives regulatory time periods. So 2 years, 5 years, for instance, now it's a 5-year regulatory period. And for all the utility companies to submit their proposals. So it doesn't become like they submit proposals at different times. Now, when they submit those proposals, the commission would interrogate those proposals formally by engaging the utility companies. And thereafter, we would have stakeholder engagements, which is what we are currently doing. After the stakeholder engagements, we now do the public hearing, which is we open it up to the entire country for everybody to make input. And this we can have as write-ups. People can make inputs through the internet, the website that we have, and they can also come to the public fora and make their input and question the utilities on the basis for which they are asking for those utility tariff increases or adjustments. Thereafter, the commission would sit and make analysis and furthermore come out with a tariff adjustment, which will be announced by the commission. So that's basically the process that we go through to arrive at the tariff.
So you have about 3 activities left to come to a conclusion.
Yes, for now, we are about finishing the stakeholder consultations. Coming week, we'll be meeting with the Parliamentary Select Committee on Mines and Energy, and we'll be meeting with the TUC as well. And we'll start with the public hearings, the meeting the general public, and thereafter, we would come to a conclusion by doing the analysis before the Commission comes to that tariff announcement point.
What's the timeline for this?
The Commission is looking at the 1st of July to come up with an adjusted tariff. So between now and let's say June 14th or middle of June, we'll be having these stakeholder engagements and the public hearings. Thereafter, we'll do all the number crunching, and then we'll come up with the tariff by the 1st of July.
What's the feedback like in the stakeholder meetings so far with MPs and the rest of them?
Well, some of them are of the view that we should give them the tariff because it's like we should buy the bullet. And this thing has been recurring for all these years. So they don't want to come back the next couple of years again and then hear the same stories. Others are also of the view that we should not give them the tariff. So it is up to the commissioner to look at the merits and demerits of the cases that are put before it and then come up with an announcement or a decision point should be reached.
Imagine they were to be giving the tariff as demanded, as you suggest some stakeholders.
Hello, Samson?
Yes, can you hear me, Doc?
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I was asking that as some stakeholders have suggested to you that go ahead and grant approval for the tariffs they request. Imagine you granted that. What are the permutations? What does it look like? What will the cost of electricity and water be?
Well, at this point in time, you said I should imagine, but the Commission is not actually going to just imagine. But the Commission will actually take all these factors into consideration, the benchmarks that have been set up before they come up with the tariff. So I'm not going to stick out my neck and say the tariffs will go up now or they will not go up. But ECG, for instance, is saying that they should move the tariff from 16 pesos to 39 pesos, which is giving us the 148% that they are asking for. The Ghana Water Company has 7 cedis per kilowatt, 7 cedis per meter cubed at this particular point in time. And they are asking for 28 cedis, 20 pesos per cubic meter, which takes up to 300%. But we have to look at all these numbers before we can come up with a decision.
So as far as you are concerned, you are only acting as an unbiased, impartial, umpire, so to speak. Is that your role?
Exactly. Because we need to, just as Engineer Brimer said, we'll have to consult with government, the legislature, and then the consumers at large. So we need to make sure that everybody is kind of satisfied. We can't be biased towards one side.
What kind of input from the public will get you to insist that, for example, what they are requesting, they can only get a quarter of what they are asking?
The service quality. We look at the service quality index. So if the consumers are crying for the well, I don't have water running through my taps, or I get water only once a week, or my electricity is highly unstable. Yeah, we have to take all those indices into consideration before we arrive at a decision.
Thank you very much. Hold on there for me. Let me go to Bright Simmons. And Bright, you heard Dr. Brahima. What's your reaction to him in the justification he gives for their proposed tariff hikes of 334%?
So, Samson, let me, with your permission, let me start showing some figures on the screen. I hope that's permitted.
That's all right.
So I've listened very carefully to Mr. Brima, and I mean, I do appreciate the fact that he's at the front line. He's got to keep the water flowing through the taps, and we have to be differential in that sense. But the truth of the matter is we don't get enough opportunity in this country to truly scrutinize public duty bearers. So here are a range of tariffs that, apply across the country, across the continent. And while it is true that in Ghana, we haven't seen as significant a range of increases as has been the case elsewhere, like in Rwanda, the truth, though, is when you look at the absolute number, what we actually charge, we are the most expensive amongst all the major economies that I have looked at. And actually, that number that you see there, the $1.06, is not entirely accurate when I look at the actual numbers in Ghana from a more comprehensive perspective. We are hitting something in the region of $1.14 per cubic meter. So compared to, the cheapest operator, like the cheapest water producer, like the Togolese regulated water utility, we're talking of a situation where we are more than 4 times more expensive from a cubic meter point of view than Togo. What is it about Togo that is way more efficient, whether in terms of the structural dynamics of policy making, business environment, etc.? So that's a fundamental challenge that I have when he says that, when I've looked at a region, our prices are competitive. They are not competitive. If their prices were competitive, he would have put that in the proposal that he made to the PURC. One of the things that you observe is that in other places where you have regulated utilities, where utilities often believe that their case is very strong, they go to the extent of going to court to force rate increases because they have the evidence. The reason why our utilities will not dare do that is because that will prompt serious scrutiny. The likes of Imani and other CSOs will file amicus briefs to go and challenge them there. Because when you look deeply into the numbers, a lot of what Mr. Brima says doesn't entirely hold water. No pun intended. I'm looking at one of the most deregulated markets in the world, the United States, where therefore making profit is fairly acceptable, for public utilities. Here in Ghana, we don't have that degree of deregulation. We're not expecting our utilities to be making massive profits. And yes, even in the United States, when you look at approved return on equity, some of the biggest utilities there, nobody is asking for 11-point-something% that VRA is asking for. We're just talking about bottled water. The ridiculousness of that argument that has been made by some people, obviously, Mr. Bremer's arguments are much more nuanced, and I'm not in any way suggesting that he's making those arguments. But some have made the arguments as if there was a parity. And there isn't a parity. Oxygen is free. 1 liter of oxygen, if you decide to buy it in concentrated form, costs you almost $100 per liter. Are we going to make a comparison between free oxygen and bottled oxygen? Why does it sound more ridiculous when I compare free oxygen versus bottled oxygen to free water, cheap tap water versus processed water? It's a competitive market in the bottled water space. Competition typically brings down prices. We don't have retail choice in Ghana. So the prices that we have are not comparative to prices, are comparable to prices that would pertain in a market where there's real competition. Now let me get to the meat of the matter. When you listen very well carefully to Dr. Obute, the problems that we face become apparent because, as I have mentioned periodically, and obviously on this show I've already mentioned, there is an overemphasis on quality of service in computing the increases that are often demanded. And that is not sufficient. There is, from our point of view, a rough approach to trying to establish how, at the very least, to compute return on equity before you go into some of the other cost dynamics. And when you look carefully, the factors that prevail in deregulated markets, many of them don't prevail here. We are not paying dividends. In these utilities, they are not paying dividends. They are often not listed on the stock markets, and therefore, in that regard, they don't bear the pressures of earning growth. In a number of instances, they are borrowing at way below the market rate. To give you an example, what Engineer Bremer did not tell you and your listeners was that the amount of the interest rate that he pays on money that is on lent to him by the government is below the interest rates that the government as a sovereign itself pays. It's almost 300 basis points below what the government today will get on the market if it went out to borrow as a sovereign borrower. He's getting like 6% on dollar loans. Who in Ghana, which entity in Ghana will get 6% on dollar loans? Can you imagine what industrial corporations in the private sector would do if they can get $6% dollar rates? So we have to be extremely careful in terms of bringing serious scrutiny to these matters. The way in which we stay at the surface and then we allow people to get away with it, it's not acceptable. And I think it is time that all of us in the media, in the civil society movement, becomes much more stringent in the way we apply scrutiny to public duty bearers. And these regulated utilities, particularly those of them that are owned by the government, are publicly owned and regulated utilities. They have to behave like public duty bearers. So I completely disagree with a lot of the analysis that has been made because they are not borne out by the facts. And I think that the PRC needs to stop relying on quality of service data alone, move into actually looking at costs.
Okay.
As a lot of the other utility commissions around the world do.
Brahma wants to make a quick reaction. Please listen to him.
Unfortunately, Bryce Simmons is speaking out of what the reality is.
Which specific issue?
The sub-region comparison he's making. What are their inputs?
What do you mean?
The on-lend loans that he's talking about, and even saying that we are taking it at a lower rate, which is not true. There is no item on the tariff.
What is not true? You're not getting your money at 6%.
Pardon me. What I'm saying is that there is nothing on the tariff. You can get PURC to respond to it now.
So
whether the tariff currently we are charging.
Yeah. So one by one.
He should let me speak.
One by one. You said you are not getting. Is it the loans at 6%?
Let me just make the point.
What
I'm saying is that it doesn't matter whether it's even on lend 0%. I'm just making a point. He should let me speak.
No, you said that is incorrect.
It's incorrect because there is no item even on the tariff build up that is meant for on lend. So where's the money coming from? There is nothing like profit on our tariff. PURC can respond to it now. That there is no item on our cost build up currently that has on lend. And we are saying that for us to do this on lend, add it to the tariff calculation. The only business GWCL does.
Bright, hold on.
Is that correct or not?
The only business GWCL does is to sell water to the people. And we have categories. Investments are not determined by profitability, by the returns. It's a social good. Government of Ghana is enjoined to sell water whether the people can pay or not. That is the case. Okay. And so when I am bringing a project that's not going to give me returns, where do you think I would put it? So when you lend such an amount of money to the utility, then allow the utility to put it on the tariff so that you can
I thought you just said there's nothing on it to be unlent.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So we are proposing, and that's why you are seeing the 300. And that's what I told you at the beginning, that when we take off the on-lend loans, which currently there is no space.
Lent money at 6% or not? I'm not clear. Is he saying that government has not taken?
I am telling you that even grants are on-lend. So what are you talking about that one? Grants are on-lend. 2015, grants were on-lend to GWCL.
No, but at what rate?
Please.
Was it at 6% or not?
Grant is 0%.
6% in some instances.
I am telling you, grant is 0%. And the on-lend to Ghana, GWCL, at a rate they collected the other ones from.
No.
Currently,
if you are borrowing at 6%,
please. You are speaking out of context. Please. You are speaking out of context. I'm sure your specialty is in energy. So please, let's talk to you. I am telling you that there is no line item on the current tariff that's for on lend. And so when you give me an escrow account to pay that money in, what it means is that I have to take it from other areas to come. We are changing pumps that are over 50 years old. We are changing a pipeline that is over 55 years old. Steel pipes are 30 years old. And so today, when we are doing all this, we are saying that there is so much pressure in the past. But we are here today. We cannot continue to complain. We must take the responsibility to do what is right. And that is why it's good that PURC is doing the consultation. That everybody has a stake in this business. Let's do our bit and make sure that the tariffs are good. I can tell him again, has he checked the liquidity of those sub-region water utilities? I can tell him today, it's Cape Town and GWCL that are liquid, that can have cash to pay for certain things. So let's put all this in context. We can't speak because we're just on numbers.
But to what end? If you are talking about GWC
and then again,
you having a good whatever liquidity,
yes,
and then the prices as he showed us comparatively, we can get better. What's the end?
Because the cost built up on the tariff, some of them are absorbed by the states. If you go to Cote d'Ivoire, there is no galamsey. And for that matter, the cost of production is as low as anything you can talk about. I am supposed to do a process loss of 5%. If I take 100 liters of water from the river, I should bring 95 liters to you. Today, some of them, you can only get 50. And the cost of treatment has gone higher, and you are sending less. And so if you are giving a tariff over 95 liters, and you are not doing 50 liters, how are you going to make the money? And so citizens are also responsible. The people who go into the rivers to mine are those who go home and say there's no water. And that is why this consultation is very, very important.
The government is supposed to ensure that they don't go there to mine in the first place. Let me get to Dr. And I'll come back to you, Bright, quickly before we take a break. But Dr. Eriko Obute, what would you say, because Brima was inviting you to confirm the issue about, the percentage at which
just on land loans on our tariff.
Yes.
Whether it is captured on the tariff.
What can you tell us?
It's not captured on the tariff.
So if it's zero, even if it's 0%.
I also want to respond to what Bright put up, saying that PURC only focuses on the quality of service to come up with a tariff. That is just an aspect of the tariff. The PURC looks at the RAB, that's the regulated asset base, looks at the depreciation, exchange rates, the inflation, and other parameters which are taken on board before they come up with a tariff. So if you just say we are looking at only the quality of service, we are focusing on only the quality of service to come up.
But a while ago, yourself, you singled out the quality of service.
No, because you asked me a question about what consumers would say that will make the PURC maybe tilt the tariff in a particular way. That's why I came up with the quality of service, because the consumers will basically not talk about the regulated asset base.
Clarify a number of important points, Samson.
They will not talk about that. So that's why I have
Samson,
to answer it that way.
Yeah, Bright, I'll come to you shortly. Right. Okay. Bright, can we hear you in some 2 minutes, and then we hear Dr. Steve Manteau and take a break.
Nobody talked about what goes into the tariff in the analysis I made.
But you were asking me saying it is quality. You said PURC focuses on the quality of service alone to come up with the tariff, which is not right.
I'm going
to correct that aspect.
I've not yet come to that point. I've not come to that point. I'll come to that point.
All right.
Because that's what you said. I'm just reacting to that particular point.
I'm not reacting to you yet. I'll react to you.
Okay.
First
now let's hear.
The argument is that the Ghana Water Company gets money from the government at a rate of 6%, and in some instances less than 6% on dollar loans. That is money that they use in some of the operations. Are they explicitly arguing that they don't get money at that rate or not? Because all the things that you're talking about, that they don't go into a tariff and they are completely meaningless.
Government
the argument
no
is, if you are an industrial operator
into GWCL,
and you can borrow at 6% or less in this country, you've got it very good. There are a lot of industrial operators that if they borrow at that
doesn't
rate,
understand it.
we're doing so much better. So this argument about whether or not they add on length into the
we
tariff
don't
and the rest,
take any money from the states.
That is relevant. It's not relevant.
GWCL takes zero money from the states.
Sorry?
It says they take zero money
from the state.
You are saying Ghana Water
takes zero money from the state. Yes, apart from the investment.
It is your own submission.
It is the investment. Hello, it is the investment.
Let me actually put the exact.
It is the investment that is the responsibility of the states to distribute the water everywhere, irrespective of whether there are good returns or not. That they lend to us, and that's what I'm saying. That those audience. Investments.
Are you saying that
we don't have a tariff on it?
Listen to this question.
Lends money to you. If the government lends money to you, they lend money to you. And I'm saying that the rate that the government lends money to you is so low compared to what others will make that you have to be extremely grateful that you're able to get money from the government at that rate.
And I'm saying that even if it is zero, you cannot even get it.
Simple.
Even if it is 0%,
that the government does not lend money to you or not, because I'm going to prove
if it is zero, even if it is zero, it is not on the tariff.
You yourself has made. I'm going to display on this screen commitments that you yourself have made, admitting that that's how much you get at from the government, the rate at which you borrow from the government. The online agreements that you have with the government.
But he's also getting it. Where are the money coming from?
You actually get that rate.
Where is the money coming from to pay? Where is the money coming from to service even the zero interest? It is your interest.
You borrow at 6% or less.
And do what with it. And do what with the loan. What are you doing with the loan?
Okay, fine.
I will
display that on the screen in a second to establish the fact that you do borrow at that rate.
And to establish the fact that on our tariff, there is it to take the money and pay.
Okay, right. Bright,
let me establish it. Let me go to the last point about quality of service data. The last point about quality of service data is that I did not say that when you are computing the tariff, you only look at quality of service data. I'm saying that in the active regulation, the documentation that is regularly submitted to you, they are primarily related to quality of service and KPIs that are primarily quality of service service linked. Of course, when you are doing a tariff computation, you will look at exchange rate and the rest. You all read those reports. I'll be completely ridiculous if I suggested that in actually building up the tariff, you don't consider those costs. I'm saying that in your active regulation, what you actually collect as in terms of reports from the regulated utilities is primarily quality of service focused. You are not collecting enough data regarding costs of the operations, cost of their investments, and you're not actively managing those matters. And I can show you documents in relation to the kind of reports that you receive and the kind of analysis that is performed.
No, but the reports are different, right? The reports are different. Maybe the report we have is a quarterly report which has only the quality of service.
No, I'm saying that is what you
So it depends on the report.
That's what I said.
Ask of different reports from the utilities. We don't.
True.
The utilities
but
do
in
not
terms
only
of
submit only one report.
Active regulation that you engage in, the back and forth that we've reviewed, 90% of those back and forth are related to KPIs that are primarily quality focused. They are not focused to. They are not related to investment cost. I've never seen a query from you to any of the regulators in the last year looking at any cost-related matter that is investment-driven. And if you are able to show us on the screen, I'll happily retract a single regulatory query related to investment, even if it's a capping model that we are questioning the inputs or whatever. So when we say these things, don't create the impression that we are somehow deceiving the public, because we look at these documents just as much as you do.
All right.
So when we make the arguments, it's careful as public duty bearers. You allow us to have a truly reasoned debate that is based on rigorous analysis of the figures.
Right.
And the data that exists.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Steve Manteau, very briefly to conclude on this subject so we can take a break and return to look at the issue of Agyapa. The economy is bad, like you admitted from the beginning. People are suffering. People can't afford transport, food. Everything is getting out of hand, really. So what is realistic? Because it is agreed that the production chain will require some will go up as a result of what is happening globally everywhere. So what would be realistic for people in Ghana who, are faced with all of these challenges?
Well, after reviewing the data, I think at the end of the day, what would be realistic is tariffs that will keep the utilities in business. Tariffs that will sustain their operations, because the converse would be worse and very difficult to think about. A situation where their operations cease, and therefore we will have to resort to other sources of water and to resort to generators and all that. Those will be much more expensive. So even as we discuss these issues, I think it's in the interest of every consumer that at the end of the day, we pay tariffs that will keep the utility companies in operation.
Okay. Dr. Obute, people are panicking ahead of this, what you expect to bring forward, because already they are struggling to afford. What will you tell them?
Yeah, well, everybody should just stay calm. PURC will take a very good look at all the proposals out before the commission, and then we'll take a decision by the 1st of July. The commissioners will announce that decision by the 1st of July. But maybe to just put a little bit of speech to Bright, if you just go onto our website, you will see the guidelines of the commission. In that guideline, you see everything that we do to come up with the tariff. So I just want us to stay away from that aspect of saying that the commission would only focus or delves a lot more on the quality of service. We do much more than that. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Brahma.
Yes.
You give an impression that there are other ways by which you could actually come to zero demand.
Yes.
How can you successfully push a bit more of that so that citizens will be cushioned?
No, it has to be innovative. I am saying that, look, if you currently go to our health institutions, a greater part of the diseases they carry there are waterborne related. Minister of Health has a budget. Minister of Sanitation has a budget. Ghana Water Company is a utility company.
Minister of Environment.
Exactly. What will we do in increasing access and quality to the citizens such that the cost of Minister of Health for the hospitals will come down? This is something that can easily be calculated with proper data. And then you say that, okay, at a point, let's shift some of the resources from health to water, so that the tariff can go down. 2, who are those polluting the water? It's not the mines. Whether they are illegal, legal or not, they are with the mining sector. What can the mining industry do as far as water supply is concerned? Because I take 100 cubic meters of water, I am supposed to take 95 cubic meters to the citizens and sell at a unit rate and get this money. But because of the activities, I'm getting 50. But the cost has even increased. So can you also look at a margin to support government to give that money?
That's where you bring in the individual responsibility also.
Exactly, because the utility company, can you imagine Ghana Water Company shuts down for a week or 2 for the whole country? Do you know the cost? You can't imagine the cost. And so this is a utility company that all of us must protect. Mateo indicated, we brought AVRL here. I keep saying it, and I'm challenging anybody. With the help of World Bank, government of Ghana together, gave them $100 million. 2017, we took over. Nothing given. The PURC, non-revenue water, was at 54% in 2017. It's currently 45%.
I see.
9 percentage points in 5 years.
So,
but they got that, and they couldn't reduce it. And they were supposed to even be reducing it by 1%.
So you are making a case that you deserve to be supported
and applauded. And people, when they are looking at the numbers, they shouldn't be looking at that the bottle is half empty.
Samson, can we look on the screen now as well?
I'm coming.
The hole is deep. We are feeling it. It has not come out for you people to see that the gravel has gone in.
All right.
And so when you are beginning to judge it as if nothing is happening, PRC will tell you that GWCL is now more proactive. We are doing a lot of things on our own. And I can tell you, our industrial meters, we purchase them with our own money. Bulk meters, we purchase them with our own money. We are carrying out innovations within the system to get the system running. But it takes some time to rectify
the entities that owe you money.
Yes, we're after them. We're going after them.
Just like ECG, I've been surprised to read and to learn about those who owe ECG in the millions. And you can't understand what sort of culture is this. So let's have Bryce Simon. You have the last word.
So I'm just showing on the screen for your viewers to read themselves.
Yes. On lending of grants.
That the Ghana Water Company borrows from the Ministry of Finance, which is essentially the government of Ghana, at 5.76% at the beginning of 2021, and they've got rates at 6% in December 2021.
That's
this is
right.
coming from their own submissions to the PRC.
Okay.
So absolutely cannot be the case that they don't borrow at that rate.
On lending of grants and loans,
it is a justification
of finance, debt overhang.
There are 5 million or more households in Ghana. 36% of them have access to pipe-borne water. So at the very least, there are about 1.5 million people enjoying pipe-borne water in Ghana. If you take Community Water and Sanitation Agency out, you should have at least something in the region of about 1 million customers.
Okay.
Ghana Water has only 680,000 customers.
That's not true.
He's not even mobilizing enough to ensure that he onboards enough customers. So I don't accept Mr. Bremer's argument that there's no more he can do on his side. And as I said in the very beginning,
thank you, Bryce. Thank you, Bryce. Now, Dr. Bremer. Yes, Bryce, hold on. Wait.
Yes.
Dr. Bremer.
Yes.
So the excerpt that he just pulled
that's what I want to respond to.
Clearly confirms that he's coming from a position of reading from facts from yourself.
I am saying that this is a justification to PURC for that increase in tariff because it is not contained in the tariff.
So how is he supposed to interpret this?
That's what I'm telling him.
He interpreted this and you say he's wrong. But this is what you put out.
No, I am saying that government of Ghana on-lend load, I mentioned it here. And if that is taken out, the tariff will come down. And if that is supposed to be there, then they have to put this on the tariff. And that's what is bringing it to 300. And that's why he must understand that it is a proposal. And if you are writing a proposal, why don't you indicate justifications?
At the beginning of 2021 and now gradually increasing to whatever figure.
So
at the rate of 6.00 in December 2021. And they talk about the rate of LIBOR interest, 4% interest.
That's what they give to us. But we are unable to service it. But it is in our books.
Okay.
Because there is no line item for it. Okay. We are saying that if they want us to do that, then all this must be captured on the tariff.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you for thank you, Bryce Simmons, for also bringing this up to put this matter to rest. Yes.
Yeah, evidence to prove the PRC point as well.
Okay,
because I think we let people get away without scrutiny.
Thank you. We take a break here, and when we return, we will go to look at the issue of Agyapa, and Bryce Simmons will stay with us. Dr. Steve Manteyao is still going to be with us. We'll be joined by Benjamin Boakye, Executive Director, Africa Center for Energy Policy, ACEP. We'll be right back.
royalties is not the place to look because royalties are sufficiently risk-free that there isn't need for additional engineering of royalties. Where we have a problem is those places where we have 10% of a mine and we've not made money for many, many, many years. Look at bauxite. We discovered, for instance, that bauxite, consistently say the operation is unprofitable and there's nothing you can do about it. They just simply say, well, they mine the bauxite, they don't make any money. So the 20% or so that we have in the bauxite regime is meaningless because they just claim they don't make money.
But is there not a difference? Here we are putting the royalties into a vehicle, a company, and hoping that this company will turn that money over and give us profit.
Okay. In that regard, if you think it's the $300 million that you can reinvest better, you have a MIF. You've changed the law in the MIF, which enables the MIF to set up an SPV, right? Today, without Agyapa, the MIF can set up a local SPV and say, what I want to put the $300 million a year that we get in gold is this. Let's discuss it. Because I'll make more money from this, and that. There's no need for any convoluted structure because we know that money is fairly certain.
Okay.
The question that arises where you need innovative thinking is where the money appears not to be coming. You seem to have an asset. It's a liquid asset, right? Where we do financial engineering and financial innovation is where you have an illiquid asset and you want to make it more liquid.
Okay.
Not when you have a very liquid asset and you now want to go and turn it into a more speculative asset. I don't understand that logic. If you look at what has happened in the Agyapa transaction, it is quite clear that someone very skilled has set out to circumvent the process, without doubt. Royalties is much more immune because we say whether or not you are making profit or not, give us our 5%. So if you want to maximize royalty intake, your proper behavior should be how you spend the money. It's as simple as that. On the other hand, we've now got to a situation where of all the minerals, that money that comes from minerals, maybe 90% or more increasing are just from royalties. Which then raises the question of this 10% equity we hold in companies, why are they not paying the dividends? So if there is a thorny problem to solve in minerals, it is that segment, the issue of how we maximize the returns to equity. And the arguments that have been made over a number of times have included the creating of a super company or super vehicle that has the maxle to make sure that representation in terms of board roles and things like that are stronger. So that the government, for instance, is able to exert within these companies enough management pressure to ensure that we get paid. There are issues to do with, obviously, poor auditing. So I was just recently being told that if you go to the mines and you have these GRE officers that are supposed to make sure that their activities are properly auditable, some of them have been at the same mine for 13 years. And there are instances where it's quite clear that some of these people that are supposed to make sure that the volumes of gold that are being produced are properly audited, have no clue what they are doing, they're highly under-incentivized, their systems are not there. So we have big problems when it comes to auditability of how much gold is being produced and the costs.
Or they may be compromised.
That's a possibility. Then you have a situation also where when you look at the cost structure of gold, it becomes very difficult at that theoretical level to suggest any improvement because sometimes shareholders are getting 1.5% and they are disclosing costs that suggest that maybe 60-something% of all costs are being spent in the country. So you look like, okay, maybe we are making enough already. Until you have to dig deep into it, then you realize that in actual fact, a lot of the purchases that are purported to be local are not sufficiently local in the way that they impact local value chains and things like that. So when you look at all of those things, we need increased presence in terms of management decision making in these mines. And a super vehicle might be able to attract the right people to do those things. In simple terms, royalties is not the place to look because royalties are sufficiently risk-free that there isn't need for additional engineering of royalties. Where we have a problem is those places where we have 10% of a mine and we've not made money for many, many, many years. Look at bauxite. We discovered, for instance, that bauxite, consistently say the operation is unprofitable and there's nothing you can do about it. They just simply say, well, they mine the bauxite, they don't make any money. So the 20% or so that we have in the bauxite regime is meaningless because they just claim they don't make money.
But is there not a difference? Here we are putting the royalties into a vehicle, a company, and hoping that this company will turn that money over and give us profit.
Okay. In that regard, if you think it's the $300 million that you can reinvest better, you have a MIF. You've changed the law in the MIF, which enables the MIF to set up an SPV, right? Today, without Agyapa, the MIF can set up a local SPV and say, what I want to put the $300 million a year that we get in gold is this. Let's discuss it. because I'll make more money from this, and that. There's no need for any convoluted structure because we know that money is fairly certain.
Okay.
The question that arises where you need innovative thinking is where the money appears not to be coming. You seem to have an asset. It's a liquid asset, right? Where we do financial engineering and financial innovation is where you have an illiquid asset and you want to make it more liquid.
Okay.
Not when you have a very liquid asset and you now want to go and turn it into a more speculative asset. I don't understand that logic. If you look at what has happened in the Agyapa transaction, it is quite clear that someone very skilled had set out to circumvent the process, without doubt.
Given this consensus which has emerged, including in the OSP's report, really, if the president is acting as a proper trustee for the beneficial owners, who are the people of this country, we can't proceed. Even with this thing, it is not in the interest of the people of this country. That's the consensus. I've not heard anybody outside die-hard loyalists or people close to the deal coming out to defend it. The points made also about the role of Parliament, which goes again to a failure of oversight on behalf of the people, adds to this thing about a kind of political elite consensus about managing our resources. In this case, actually, primarily not even in their own interest. In general, foreign companies and their shareholders have been the main beneficiaries of our resources. And one of the things which has been clear since the commodities boom is how all the contracts that have been signed across the continent, their terms are so poor that we don't even get the returns that we should be getting.
The president's directive is that after he had seen the report, he also asked the finance minister to also bring his response, which is a confidential memo. And he said the president has authorized to be made public that report, also the memorandum, to contribute to the national discourse on the matter.
I'm saying that that proposal by the president really doesn't stand up if in the context of the totality of the conclusions of the OSP report. It doesn't stand up in the face of the consensus that the OSP report finds with all the technical, economic, process criticisms that have been made of the Agyapa deal. So if the president is acting in the interest of the beneficial owners of this resource, why does he want to persist with something which has been found to be flawed in so many aspects? So even though the president has directed, it is our right and responsibility, first as the beneficial owners, the citizens, okay, and also also who have an interest in this case, to analyze the president's reaction, to find out whether really it's a reaction which has legs. He may have the power to direct. That's his power. But it is possible to conclude that the president's proposals don't have legs.
You sought this approach by informing cabinet that there was an urgent need to get money into for development. What are we looking at in terms of development through this vehicle?
Yeah, Samson, what we are envisioning is that we're going to create the largest sort of royalty company in Africa. And so we'll put about a fifth of the money aside in the quest for acquisition of other royalties as we build up this company. And you can see how $2 million can become 38 billion in a matter of time if managed properly. And that's amazing resources for that. So we'll put that type of money away as we look for that. The second aspect is that you look at the whole value chain of gold, and Ghana does not really participate in that much. First of all, we don't even have an international standard refinery for all the gold that we have mined. And so that we need to invest in and to make sure that once the Ghana stamp is on bullion, you know, it is accepted internationally. The whole tourism, education, mining communities investment has not been done well. I mean, it is quite tragic when you look at Takwa and Obuasi, given the same rules, how far we have come or how far we have not come. So there will be investments in that place. How is it that, you know, being such leaders in cocoa and gold, you cannot, you and I, Samson, name 2 or 3 millionaires in this area? You know, let's find a way in which there's dedicated resources so that we can support, you know, miners in Ghana. The difference between us and South Africa is that the South Africans own those places, and we have other companies doing that. That needs to be reversed, but that needs deliberateness, you know, and these resources will help. Then, of course, when the president sent me to Parliament for the mid-year, as you know, we announced Obatampa, which is a 100 billion enterprise that we have on our books, a quarter of our GDP, of which 70% will be private sector and 30% will be that. So the issue of supporting the construction of the district hospitals, and then here the president has also said that this will be done by Ghanaian contractors, because he's thinking through this whole anemic response to housing and saying, how do we build our contractors so that from there we segue into a national mass housing construction plan? And I think that is necessary. A third element is the whole financial chassis. And so the creating of a national development bank, which will be a wholesale bank, so that we can then invest in our venture capital, in our Exim banks, in our Ghanaian banks, to build this regional hub that we have committed to. So it becomes, you know, pushing ourselves beyond what you say, the poverty of ambition, to realize that this transformation, once God willing, the president is given 4 more years, we take off running.
Are we not capable of listing, itemizing the specific development projects with clear timelines tied to the revenue, the money that is coming from this enterprise, so that that will be your social contract? So we can hold you to it.
I think if you were to deconstruct what I just said, you know, first 20% for royalty acquisitions, you know, around and to build this enterprise. Second, the value chain of gold, which means that what money are you putting in to build this world-class refinery, etc., and what do we do for our indigenous communities. Third, I talked about the hospitals and home construction and support for the National Development Bank. So those can be spelled out for you.
The 20% that you say is already there, untouched. The 20% of the royalties, correct?
Right, that in terms of the development fund.
So it is not all the monies, royalty money that is going. But questions are being raised as to that particular percentage. Has it in fact been available for the purposes?
The 20% development fund.
Yes.
You know, I think it's been a bit quite not been exacting. And our
Kweku Boisiako asked, can you publish a 30-year cash flow projections based on the Agyapa model, juxtaposed side by side with our inflows from the royalties under the current arrangement over the same 30-year period? And 30 years will be the life of a mining lease. And you know, this lasts for the life of a mining lease, and even when it is renewed. And he says, I believe this discussion is about maximizing the overall financial and socio-economic benefits that Ghana should derive from our mineral resources. It's a numbers game. So let's publish the numbers and let Ghanaians interrogate the numbers using whatever models or alternatives they have, so we can cut out the suspicions and personal attacks and rather focus on the real issues. What will you say to him?
I think that's welcome. It's nothing that we cannot or should not do, and really in the end, after 3, 4, 5 years, it's all projections. as to what you think the mine life is and what the operating companies.
So do you want to do this?
Well, we can. I can go through the 12 operating mines, do your guesstimate for the 4 developing mines, and see where you are going to. You know, the issue.
And this has been the cry. So the publication. When would you like to do this?
We can do that. I can get my guys to start on it. You know.
So we can expect this to be done.
Yeah, we can.
Right.
You know, because but the challenge, you know, of all of us is, you know, how do you do the valuation for where this the price of this company will be on the stock market over the 30 years.
The Clarion call has been paused.
Okay.
Are you going to pause?
No, we're not. I think this is a good transaction. I think that the issues that have been raised, we have put light on that.
I mean, my firm philosophical belief really is that the capital markets are meant for something that will lead us to equity resources, and we are not leveraging on it. And therefore, the question, it's not a question of whether monetization of mineral royalties or listing of the company is bad or good. You know, it is good because that is how you raise resources. The question is the process of doing that. If we have a problem with the process, let's articulate it, let's cure it, but let's not drop, you know, something that will be good for us and reduce our debt exposure. You know, so those are two very different questions. How best to do it, as opposed to don't do it. And so my mind is still there. I know the president has mentioned something about that, going through the AG and Parliament again to do that. But it's not something that I think is an asset to the country that one needs to drop. You need to examine all your equity and debt positions and make the best choice for the country, not the fleeting instances. We would never have done senior high school if we listened to other people. That's 400,000 lives now, you know, that have a chance to do something. We would have stopped short at e-levy because of the noise, and suddenly we have a tax handle that will be phenomenally important for the country. So we need to look at that. We would never have done senior high school if we listened to other people. That's 400,000 lives now, you know, that have a chance to do something.
Right, so you have been listening to Bright Simmons. That was in 2020. Dr. Yao Graham of the Third World Network, and you also heard Finance Minister Kenneth Ofori-Atta in 2020 before the elections. We want to first ask the questions whether or not the promise has been kept to, among others, broaden consultation, engage chiefs, engage Council of State, and as you heard him in that interview that we had on Newsfile, that they were going to publish a 30-year cash flow projections, as it were, so that we could all be informed. He had tied the projects, as in this, you know, Agyapa, to a number of development projects, making sure that our dead bedding, we are relieved of our dead bedding to a large extent, building a bank, building a, an industry, a refinery, doing the hospitals, and more importantly, perhaps, ensuring that the mining communities get what they deserve, are improved. Is that where we still are? And you just heard him now on Thursday saying we are going back to Agyapa. So what sort of review has been done? And what is new? Let me get on the phones, on the Zoom again. Bright Simmons is with us. Dr. Steve Mantiao is with us. And Benjamin Boakye, Executive Director, Africa Center for Energy Policy, is also here with us. So, gentlemen, I'd like you to briefly, first of all, tell us what new has gone on, and if you are familiar with what is now being touted as the new Agyapa. Yes, Bright.
Thank you, Samson. I mean, as far as we're concerned, the only significant developments of note is that there's been a suit by international actors against Agyapa that is pending in the ECOWAS court. I think judgment will be given sometime in July of this year. Nothing else has changed dramatically since then. The government has still not engaged with mining communities. They've not engaged with CSOs. There have been no efforts made to tackle the very critical issues that we've raised, some of which goes to the very heart of the integrity of the process, etc. So absolutely nothing has changed from the perspective of most of the CSOs that were engaged with this matter.
Ben
Except,
Boakye,
of course, that the passage of time has proven that Agyapa is unconscionable, cannot be countenanced, it's unpatriotic, and should completely be consigned to the dustbins of history.
We will come to that. Benjamin Boakye, what can you update us on? The promised consultations and all that needed to be done, are the instructions of the president on the back of Martin Amidu's risk assessment, corruption risk assessment, and the campaign by the 22 CSOs that were against Agyapa?
Yeah, thanks, Samson. I think from our end, we haven't seen any change. We saw some semblance of consultation, one in the University of Ghana, which was widely publicized, and you had students who had no clue what this whole transaction is about, to be able to interrogate what government wants to do. So they had the same people who are sponsoring the transaction present their case and leave the room. All right. Beyond that, I mean, we have been tracking some actions, trying to circumvent this whole consultation process through some re-engineering of protocols, with institutions like GRA, GIPC, to establish bilateral investment treaties with Jersey, to circumvent some of the critical concerns that civil society have had. And it was revealing, even listening again to the finance minister, the questions you asked him, about whether he is willing to do the intellectual engagement on the propriety of the transaction. And they have not been available, for us to interrogate what he is trying to do, except to say, in a classical, stream of consciousness fashion, he's trying to tell you that if you're against the transaction, then you may be against the apostles of the land, and not ready to really avail himself for us to interrogate why he wants to, as Bright indicated, give away the most secured stream of revenue in the mining industry into speculative investment, as he's seeking to do. So, I mean, they have not been available. We thought the words of the president were supreme and people were going to abide by that to ensure that the interest, of the state really is high above everybody's interest in trying to understand what we are getting ourselves into, and for us to see what better options are available for optimizing the mining industry in general, and not just royalty.
Let me find out what Dr. Steve Mantiao also thinks, if he has a different update. But Ben, you would recognize that that was 2020. We're going into the elections. There are those who said that this was only to, as it were, placate people going into the elections. Yes, Dr. Steve Mantiao. What do you know has changed? Please unmute your mic.
Nothing that has come to my attention. And I find the Minister of Finance's comments this week, quite disingenuous, inviting us to discuss the Agyapa deal because he's bent on bringing it back, when in actual fact, he has not made public the revised transaction documents for us to be able to see how the concerns we've raised about the transaction, of which he's aware, because apart from the press conferences and the campaign that we waged, we had the opportunity of meeting with him and his team, and we laid our issues before him, so he's aware. And so for him to be inviting us to kind of discuss the approach and the process, it's for me something that smacks of intransigence and disrespect to the CSOs. At best, he should have acknowledged the input we have made thus far. He should have indicated what particular changes and how our specific concerns have been addressed and all that. But he kind of glossed over them and gave the impression that they were going to proceed regardless. And I think that does not speak well of a very democratic regime.
In 2020, on this platform, he had been conciliatory and said that, you know, the CSO's involvement was important, was useful, it was good for our growing democracy and all of that. Today, we're hearing him say that, you know, opposition to or criticisms of the e-levy, among others, were noises, and that if the government were to be, you know, fixated on these noises or listening to these noise, it would not have done free SHS. E-levy would not have been, you know, passed, which is an important, you know, tax handle. So that is a signal to you that you have been heard. They are in control. They must, you know, steer the ship of state.
Well, Samson, I think this is the intransigence I talk about. It looks like the government is hell-bent to take Ghanaians for granted on this particular issue. Reference to free SHS and other programs that actually drew some criticisms from Ghanaians is, for me, untenable in this discourse. This is because, look, nobody had ever actually contested the usefulness of free SHS. It was a matter of the strategy and approach. And I think the current approach has brought untold hardship onto this country. A lot of the fiscal challenges we are facing today are as a result of the free SHS. We should have actually graduated the implementation.
Which is actually his approach at the time.
That has created a lot of problems and challenges.
He didn't approve of the wholesale approach at the time. Hello, Dr. Mantiao. I think we are losing his feed there. So let me get back to Bright Simmons and Ben Boache to get into the details. So, Bright, we tried to get back to memory lane about some of the issues that you had raised at the time. You're still where you are? Nothing changes?
Yes, Samson. And I think the Minister of Finance comments betray a certain mindset that the government has to be cautious about. It's as if the government feels that merely because in the face of serious opposition they get something done, it's automatically evidence of the success of that thing. So he says that, you know, notwithstanding all the opposition against e-levy as it was designed, they've still got it passed through, and therefore it's a good thing.
He calls it noise. He calls it noise, not opposition.
Yes, despite all the noise, they still get it passed through, and that is a good. I think that's a very dangerous attitude to take, because you could use a lot of power to bulldoze your way through, and that would not necessarily lead to the right outcomes for the nation. But on Agyapa, I mean, we have to, you know, just rehash the arguments we've made so people get the point. In this country, over 95% at this point of our mineral revenues come from gold. And from gold, over 90% of the revenues are royalties. There's 5% or roughly that amount of the gold sales that are made from this country going to the government, whether or not the mines make profits. We have equity in the mines. We own a percentage of the mines as a state. But because the mines don't declare that much profit, we don't make enough income from that. We also get some corporate taxes, but that is also hinged on profits. So the royalties are the only fairly stable source of income that we get from the mining sector. And the government's plan is to take 75% of this amount from the mines that we are able to track, because we also have a lot of unregulated mining in this country. So from the mines that we're able to track, we want to take 75% of that money, put it into a vehicle, get some of the money up front, and hope that in the future they will get some dividends. So it's a matter of just calculating whether or not what they are saying benefits the country. But the way that they want to do it also matters. The way they've structured the transaction also matters. And we've had a public servant of impeccable integrity, the Honorable Martin Amidu. This was a gentleman that was an attorney general. And that in his own government, when he felt that things were not being done right, openly warned the public, eventually left the government, proceeded to court, used his own resources to secure the money that he felt the country had lost back to the country. He was so respected that when the government changed and the government wanted to set up a special prosecutor's office, they felt that the person best positioned to hold that office was the Honorable Martin Amidu, and they brought him into government. So there could be nobody more independent, nobody more impartial in this matter. He took months investigating this. And on page 55 of a very detailed report, he established clearly, without doubt, that all the evidence he's been given and all the analysis he's performed tells him that there's nothing within the structures that have been created for this Agyapa that will not prevent people that are close to government eventually owning Ghana's most secure stream of income from gold through proxies. And therefore, to his mind, the conflict of interest amounts to corruption and that this was dangerous for the country. That is where we are. He analyzed in great detail how it arose that the government manipulated the procurement processes in the way that it acquired the transaction advice for this enterprise, and that how eventually mechanisms have been created so that what will eventually happen is that you will have trusts in offshore jurisdictions with very limited transparency, and the people that will own this stream of income will be allies and proxies of people that are close to government. They will get this income, but nothing is definitely assured in the long term. So this is where we start. This is where we start. This is the only serious independent analysis of Agyapa that has been conducted in this country by someone that you can perceive to be independent-minded. He had no ill will against the government. It was the government that brought him from opposition and then made him special prosecutor. He's the only one that the government trusted to look deeply into this matter. He took months, talked to the finance minister and everybody else involved, and then came to that conclusion. For the government to completely dismiss that a few months thereafter and say they are just bringing it back betrays a degree of impunity that frightens most of us in civil society. But let's go back to the key point. And I know I'm hogging a limelight here because there are extremely qualified people on this show who will do further justice to the matter. But let's go to the fundamental matter at stake. We want to take money that future governments going into 30 years from now, many, many years, because the way the agreement has been structured, this thing could be recycling itself for years. Money that many governments rely upon. A very significant source of money. Money that, given our current projections, is more than yield levy. Every year goes into the state treasury. We're going to pack it all into some vehicle, sell half, get the money up front, and the remaining half, we leave it to independent so-called directors to determine how much dividend they will pay, if they make any dividend at all. That is the nature of the situation we are facing. This will be the most expensive capital raise in a long time. We know why. That 500 million they say they will make by selling half that entity or 49% of that entity. At least 10% of it will go to the advisors that they have handpicked because they like them And those advisors and other transactions of brokers and the like will take more than 10% of it. So the implied interest rate of getting that money is higher than if you borrowed at our last rates that we borrowed on international market. It's almost 10%. So when they say that, oh, equity is cheaper, we don't want debt because we are overloaded with debt, that does not make any sense at all, because elementary finance will tell you that equity is more expensive than debt. But in this case, beyond the general cost of equity, you also have huge transaction costs associated with it. So in fact, we don't even get the full $500 million that we've been promised. On top of that, once the company is is listed, the way they've structured the listing is such that it's entirely controlled by minority directors, who are investors that their transaction advisors, because it's a book running IPO, will choose. And they will determine whether or not they invest in Ghana's gold sector or they pay dividend, etc., etc. Lastly, all the arguments that have been made so far, none of them vindicates the position that this approach helps the country in any way. If we look at current gold price and we even reduce it a little bit in terms of an average for the rest of the year, look at the likely amount of gold production now that we're also seeing significant upticks in some of the mines, we could potentially make almost $300 million or even more this year, potentially. Now, if you go and sell the rights to make gold, to earn this income in the international market, and take half of that for $500 million, no other money necessarily certain, it's like saying that money that we can in 2 years make, we should sell the family jewelry in order to get it. Every valuation that has been shown, everyone who have looked at analysis independently has come to the conclusion that the valuation that they are using for the asset is perhaps 1/3 of what you could get if you were using an arm's length transaction. That's not even the most important point. The most important point is that no government should be given the power to deny future governments of revenue in the fashion that is being proposed at the rate that is being proposed. We've seen instances where consistently the current government takes future streams of income that other governments will use, front load it, keeps that money for today, and forget about future generations. Think of all the money from ESLA or the energy levies, think of the money from the GET fund, and consistently we create these structures, front load the money, spend it, forgetting how we're going to pay for our other debts in a few years forward. We think that is not really acceptable. There should be a sense in which, even if the government wanted to securitize the gold through a much more cleaner, efficient process than has been proposed, they should not be looking at all the discretionary income that we earn from royalties, apart from those that are bound by statute to other purposes. That money that they want to put in, they should have put in a smaller fraction of the gold at a much higher valuation. So we've decided, from the point of view of looking at all the prudential measures, how much gold is rising in terms of production and prices over the long term, how much the price of gold tends to over the century to rise, and that if you fixed the situation the way that they've done it, such that get a little benefit upfront, and then you forget about what will happen 1 year from now, 2 years from now, you get into the kind of fiscal situation we are in, where we borrowed so recklessly on the Eurobond market, without proper planning about our debt sustainability. Lastly, and before I come back if you give me the chance again in the near future, we've also looked at analysis of, in pure terms, how much are we selling the gold for? Because that's what it amounts. We have a percentage of the gold we mine in this country that come to us regardless of what happens. 5% of the gold that is mined come to us regardless of what happens. We are proposing to sell half of that upfront. How much are we selling it for upfront per ounce? How much of transactions that look like this, what is often called royalty streaming, where you are selling the money you get in the future today? And we find out that Ghana is being cheated dramatically when you look at comparisons with deals that have been done recently. To the point where, in some instances, by looking at all the factors involved, something you can sell today for $1,900, sell in the future for maybe $450 if you take into account inflation and everything else. You are trying to sell at $200 per ounce after you've computed all the factors that matter. So our argument is, this is a way to take something that belongs to the people of Ghana and give it to investors and others that are perhaps favored by this administration, but not necessarily people that, if Ghanaians had a say in the matter, they will want to take over those assets.
Thank you very much. What a brilliant submission there with those slides. That's a lot of work that has been done in just how many minutes? Thank you very much, Bright. You're invited to send us your comments and your views. First of all, tell us how you are getting ready for the hikes in tariffs for water and for electricity. We understand that the current circumstances are really harsh. Transportation fares have gone up. Food, everything else is going up. And inflation is running crazy. And this is not limited to only Ghana, but elsewhere in the world. In America, it's getting really bad. Then, what do you say? Should Agyapa return? The government wants Agyapa back. Should it return? Bright raised the thorny issue on the valuation. There was questions about the devaluation or the wrong valuation and so on. This is how the finance minister responded to that. Let's listen to him again, and this was in 2020. After that, let's hear Ben Boakye on how we should look forward, including the question of the valuation of this generational assets and wealth. You say we will get to know the value and that this is nominal. And you had actually, began by saying that we can't possibly know the value before the IPO happens. Now, are we not talking about, like you mentioned, two different things?
Yeah.
Price is different from value. And what value you put on the royalty will affect the determination of the price on the market.
That's not necessarily true.
Okay, help me.
That's not necessarily. So let's say I have a software company, and I go into, so the auditors will say, well, so what are you bringing to the table? Okay, and you have a few equipment, etc., etc., and so that ends up being $1,000. Okay, then I go to the market, and the market determines that these ideas that I have are 100 times multiple of that value. So I'm trying to really make a distinction between presuming, that stated capital or value that is put to create a balance sheet is what it is you go to the market for, and that it is somehow linked in a way in which you then compromise the valuation that we are going to have. And I think that really is
there must be an empirical basis for that. And the question that is being asked is, how did we arrive at this value?
And that is what
the suggestions coming up is that even if we relied on the 11 mines,
right?
The projected production will show that we should have far more. So that's the concern, really.
And we don't do these things, off the cuff in terms of determining the fair value, as we say, of the financial asset. And so I will have to interrogate, so how many ounces really do they use, and what are the different mine lives that we are talking about, some 4 to 15, etc., etc.
Right.
I could even add that in future, because we are going to be buying royalties of other companies, that also could be factored in to see what you get. Then on an accounting basis, the discount rates have an effect on it, okay? So you do something like 7.5% for the operating mines, you do about 10% for the operating mines, and I think they struck a balance of about 8.1% to do that. But for the market valuation, a discount as high as 5% and could be used. And this was all done with IFRS and the auditing firms to really come to something that then is acceptable and for us to go. Right. But the issue that I really want to stress is that this is not going to compromise the way in which we strike the value for at IPO. Okay. In the same way in which Ashanti might have been determined at 480 million and we went at 1.8 million. So we have a history and therefore a comfort to know that yes, we accept that there can be different ways in which one comes to evaluation for the fair market value for the books and a very different way in which the pricing will be done for going to market.
Okay. Right. Ben, what do you say? I think more importantly, and again, having also just watched and listened to Bright's presentation a while ago, what's the way forward?
Yes, thanks, Samson. I think Bright has gone into the process where the minister is now inviting us. Because from civil society perspective, our initial work was really to focus on the propriety of the transaction, to see how we optimizes the interest of Ghana. It is not because we didn't know that the process was faulty. We deliberately left that out. And, Martin Amidu did a detailed work, from, the system perspective. And you also had the Attorney General also raising significant concerns about why Ghana would want to do such a transaction. But as I indicated, we wanted to focus on exposing the problems with the transaction, and one of which was the valuation question. And even when you look at the valuation, you can only trend available data on the producing asset. You are assigning 48 leases to Agyapa, and we have only 12 projects on those lists. There can be many, many projects on those leases in the future. So if you use revenues or royalties from the 12 projects to do your estimation and your valuation, of which even in that space, you are still undervaluing the asset, what do you do with the future projects that will come on that concession, for which the investor will still benefit, because we have codified the geographic location of these 48 leases into an agreement and assigned the interest to Agyapa in this transaction. So what that simply means is that any investor who puts in money because of projections on the 12 project stands to benefit even if we get hundreds of projects on the 48 leases into the future. And our position is that it's not a simple cash book financial analysis that you can do to be able to estimate what potentially we can get. And the numbers are there. If you track, even on the 12 producing asset, you realize that the companies every year discover more gold and the timelines of the project extend. And that is why, the sponsors of the transaction, which again exposes the process, were smart to say that as long as gold can be extracted from those leases, Agyapa has an interest in it. So it is deceptive for anybody to say that, we have 5 or 15 years time frame. And that is not in the agreement. The agreement states that as long as gold can be commercially extracted from these leases, by giving us $500 million, these investors have up to 49% stake on these leases. And that is really worrisome. All right. And if you track back to the process where they're inviting us to see that the people who engineered the whole process, from the establishment of the MIF Act to the agreements that subsequently ensued, it is the same people who knew what they wanted from this transaction. All right. And we cannot pretend we do not know at this point. And I think civil society have to do a good job of now also getting into that process to expose why some of these problems are emerging, for which, nobody wants to listen and engage on the intellectual basis why Ghana cannot take a less risky asset and inject it into the kind of risk and assumptions that we are being exposed to. And the finance minister makes the point that, I mean, if we list on the stock exchange, we could all of a sudden turn this asset into several billion. And I heard him mention $38 billion. I mean, what is the numbers? What are the numbers to justify or to show that we can track that growth in the next 10, 15, or 20 years? I mean, the biggest streaming company with most diversified asset is Franco-Nevada. And their assets about $26 billion for all the metals that they trade in. And for the many years that they have been in the space, you know, diversifying into many portfolios. Finance Minister wants to convince us that in the space of time, we can be able to outperform all other streaming companies that are all hovering around $1.5 billion, you know, to move ahead of Franco-Nevada. That has to be justified. And that intellectual discussion is really crucial at this point. Why we wanted this agreement so badly to go back to Parliament is because of the posturing of the finance minister. And you heard the video that you played from last week, that you either listen to him or not, because he's willing to do it. But so our hope was that if we had this agreement back to Parliament, then we have opportunity to then engage in that intellectual exercise and also examine the process that gave birth to this Agyapa transaction. And also, I mean, the new appetite to now, you know, securitize all our natural resources, you know, for a short-term gain. And this is not just happening to our royalty, and we have to pay attention to that. Just last year, we had finance minister supporting GMPC to buy 7% stake in our oil fields. And that asset is now hiding in Cayman Islands. All effort by civil society to get that asset into Ghana has failed. So you have $300 million cash flow that in this critical period of our country can support the budget and provide buffer, you know, for the kind of books that he's looking for to be able to raise debt. But it's hidden in Cayman Islands and it's not part of our budget. All right, there are also speculations about attempt to use the Heritage Fund to also create another security for investment. So civil society will have to double up and now examine the process much more thoroughly to see what is engineering that faulty assumptions around how we can optimize our resources. Let's come back to even some of the assumptions that is creating MIF and many other state enterprises to be able to do business in the space. On this same royalty that is supposed to go into investment, social capital investment, to improve lives of our people, to reduce carnage on our roads, because we passed MIF without consultation. Last year, Ghana government gave 1.3 billion Ghana cedis to MIF. In spite of the budget, the big hole in this budget, for MIF to now think about what investments they want to do with it. And they're now saying that they want to invest about $500 million in small-scale mining and track the mining industry. It is only the large-scale mining companies that are contributing significantly to revenue in the mining sector. Even though small-scale mining gives us about 40% in production. So you are now taking the revenue you are getting from the big-scale companies and go and risk it in the small-scale sector. And the operational cost of MIF alone is about 30 million Ghana cedis. You know, if you trend that in the next 5-10 years, the money that you could invest directly into infrastructure development and building the country, you are now getting into that speculative assumption that if you set up vehicles to be able to reinvest the revenue, that is what will generate the returns. We need to interrogate that to see whether, you know, fixing the road as a government is better than assuming that you can make investment and generate returns. All right, so Samson, it creates a new avenue for us all, civil society, media, and independence to be able to analyze where we are going as a country with our natural resources and apply the brakes at this point. Because if you track just the institutions that have been established in the past 3 to 4 years, we are pumping about 100 million Ghana cedis a year just to maintain these institutions. You talk about MIF, you talk about GISDEC, you talk about GUIDEC, you talk about Petroleum Hub. They are all siphoning resources that can actually go into social capital and alleviate the plight of our people in these hard times. And we have to take a critical look at these kind of flowery assumptions that are not generating value for the Ghanaian people.
Interesting there. In the circumstance that we find ourselves, clearly the government is determined to proceed. When it had absolute majority in Parliament, of course, as people have said, because of elections, it pulled the brakes. Now it says it will go forward, and you have a hung Parliament. You are still looking for the prospects of it getting to Parliament so you can participate. Is that a realistic, expectation?
I mean, from what we have been tracking, it appears not realistic, but I think all of us have to jump in. As I indicated, Finance Minister now wants to sign a bilateral investment treaty with Jersey, the tax haven, to allow Agyapa to happen. They want to sign double tax agreement with Jersey again, all in the name of Agyapa. So they are determined to circumvent the promise by the president for the transaction to come back to Parliament. So these are the things that they are doing. That again, advocacy has to be stronger, civic action has to be stronger, to pull the brakes on. Otherwise, hope of getting this back through Parliament may not materialize, because as the agreement that was approved, if they are able to get the so-called investors to be comfortable with other arrangements, they will push through without going back to Parliament.
From where you sit, this must not happen at all, or what is it, one critical thing that must happen to it before it happens?
You see, from where I sit, royalties are not what you need to securitize or to improve how the mineral industry functions. I heard the minister mention how other countries have fared well, like South Africa. If you go to South Africa, royalties are not 5%. Some royalties are below 1%, all right? And the reason why they're able to do that is because they have optimized the industry. They have local capacity to participate in the industry. So their interest is rather in optimizing the value chain and making much more money than royalties. Ghana is still focusing much more on royalty because we haven't gotten to that extent where we have extensive local participation and participation in the industry, and therefore we think that getting the revenue at the top rather works. So the end game really is to look at how do we get where South Africa is, be able to participate, empower our local industries and businesses to participate in the industry and generate more value. If you go and lock your 5% in royalty, and for the life of all mines in 48 potential leases, how then do you get to the point where you can reduce the royalty to encourage investment upstream so that you can tie your local businesses to the upstream industry when it becomes possible? So you are locking your fiscal regime to a Agyapa transaction because your foresight is so limited to what you can get today and not what the industry should look like 5-10 years from now. That is why I keep saying that it goes beyond fiscal understanding of how the industry works to actually optimizing the entire value chain, talking to the rest of the segment. The Natural Resources Ministry has a role to play in this. Industry has a role to play in this to ensure that we align, our local businesses and industries to be able to optimize the sector. We cannot use fiscal engineering to curtail any other process that can better enhance the potential of the mining industry for Ghanaians.
All right. As already invited you already, let's have your views, your comments on your preparedness for the tariff hikes, and what do you say? Should Agyapa return after listening to all that you hear from our guests? Ben Boakye raises the issue of the Jersey matter again. Let's hear what the finance minister had to say about this. Obviously, nothing has changed. And then we take a break. We return to hear from Dr. Steve Manteyao. We will then have the opportunity to have all our guests give us their concluding statements.
Fundamental question then becomes, what is wrong with Jersey? Yeah? And then you say, how are you maximizing this decision that you want to make? So Jersey is part of the United Kingdom, okay, in which they have determined that in giving certain tax forbearances, it enables companies to be listed, to come there and also list on the London Stock Exchange. So in terms of transparency and an ability to see what they are doing, that is not something that we worry about. Registering the company in Jersey, enabling us for the investor to feel comfortable with the jurisdiction and therefore invest, it's important. So you look at all of the various companies like Wheaton, Franco-Nevada, etc., even the Norwegian fund listed in Luxembourg and the Cayman Islands, etc., so that they take advantage of investor comfort to do that. So you ask yourself, you know, what is it that we are being so much more Catholic than the Pope?
We would never have done senior high school if we listened to other people. That's 400,000 lives now, you know, that have a chance to do something. We would have stopped short at e-levy because of the noise, and suddenly we have a tax handle that will be phenomenally important for the country. So we need to look at that.
You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. And my guest, Bright Simmons, Honorary Vice President, Imani Africa, Dr. Steve Mantea, Policy Analyst and Co-Chair of Ghana Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, Benjamin Boache, Executive Director, Africa Center for Energy Policy, ACEP. And they all belong to the 22 civil society organizations that kicked against Agyapa on broad matters of, you know, risk and governance issues as far as the deal is concerned. This show is brought to you by Candace courtesy of Bank of Africa, strong as a group, close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go, Ashesi University educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa, Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. Waylead Properties, home is where one starts. Duroplast, where Duroplast goes, water flows. Trasaco, fast floor, stronger, faster, and affordable. So the CSOs assisted all of us in exposing important governance vulnerabilities and risks from the deal. And these included the risk of the valuation, or what they call the undervaluation, woefully undervalued. You had other aspects like Future Qatar and the rest of them writing about this subject matter and saying that we're giving just too much of what we could get, you know, and that we stood to get a lot more if we could just wait and manage the assets more properly. They had issues with loss of control over the gold sector governance, loss of ability to repay existing loans. There was limited consultation, and there were also questions of transparency and accountability, and then corruption risk, which Martin Amidu did the assessment as special prosecutor, and the deal failed all the tests. K. Amofa says, it seems in Ghana, public servants are employed to tell citizens about existing problems instead of proposing solutions. It's always not the fault of the public servant, but everyone else. God help us. Eugene Plastique says, intellectual fisticuffs on Newsfile. This is what we need most of the time on issues, professionals from the sectors involved. okay, confront each other with the facts and figures to arrive at the best possible way forward. Linker says price of utilities, especially water, should be increased on regional basis. That is, areas of regions that encourage and condone galamsey and pollution of water bodies should be made to pay more. Well, you go to those places where the mining goes on, and you find that those who are actually behind the mining are from your capital, national capital. The Emperor says tariff increment at this critical moment is just insensitive. Prices of goods and services have seen astronomical hikes in the past months. OK Azuma says we must strengthen Parliament and put in mechanisms to block the blatant maneuverings we saw on TV when e-levy was passed. This would help us to check executive excesses in times of this cruel Agyapa quagmire. Parliament is weak in the current regime. KG Kofi Amwa says, let's admit and open our eyes to this. The government wants to do all it can to still control and benefit from the nation's resources, even in opposition. Fianco Henry says, if you manage the job well, you will have enough to support the company in hard times. They have squandered the revenue, nothing left to support the economy. Right, thanks for your messages. Now let me go to Dr. Steve Manteyao. Dr. Steve Manteyao, you had this to say this week, so I want you to hear this first, and then let's hear you continuing from that. You spoke briefly about this Agyapa deal, and this is what you had to say. Please listen.
It gladdens my heart that at the peak of the campaign against this arrangement, and following the release of Mr. Martin Amidou corruption report, the president stepped in and asked that the process was stalled, and that the concerns that we're raising must be considered and factored into the arrangement, and then brought back to Parliament for reconsideration. So it isn't like we've been criticizing the deal without making suggestions as to how it can be improved. This is what we've been doing. We had expected that the finance minister, given that it's been made public that the transaction documents have been revised, would have been, if he were acting in good faith, disclosed the revised document for us to be able to interrogate it and assure ourselves that the concerns we had about the transaction had been adequately taken care of. Some of us have been trying to lay hands on the supposed revised documents without success. So I will take opportunity of this medium to request the finance minister to publicly disclose the revised Agyapa transaction document so that we can all discuss it from a very informed position and see how together we can improve it for the benefit of this country.
You said this a while ago. If you do not get a voluntary, public disclosure as you demand of the finance minister, it would have been expected that this naturally would have happened. If he doesn't do that, if the government doesn't do that, what next?
Well, Samson, I will be pleasantly surprised if the government did that. So even in requesting that government made full disclosure, I'm not deluded into thinking that they will oblige. Let me say that all government is doing with Agyapa is trying to avoid scrutiny in terms of how they manage our mineral revenues in this country. Because in 2016, they promised us in the MPP manifesto a very comprehensive framework for managing mineral revenues, similar to the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, which has been hailed globally as one of the best, in fact, the best in Africa. So we're expecting a Mineral Revenue Management Act. And what did we get? A MIF, which actually has built into it a mechanism to shortchange this country. Now, if the government indeed has nothing to hide, they would have voluntarily, first they would have engaged the CSOs following the president's directive. And they would have also disclosed the outcome of the consultations and the revised documents. These they are unable to do because they know nothing substantial has changed. And so, well, the option we have as CSOs, as citizens, is to raise the concerns and hope that all Ghanaians will actually be part of this resistance of this scheme to shortchange Ghana.
Right. So in the next 3 minutes, let me hear from Bright Simmons. What can you say in a minute will be your concluding comments moving forward?
Give me a second. I'm just going to show you something on the screen in just the very short time that we have.
That's all right. The Constitution, in its very important provision, tells us what minerals are in this country. Article 257 says all public lands in Ghana shall be vested in the president on behalf of and in trust for the people of Ghana. It proceeds to tell us where we stand when it comes to minerals. He's only holding them in trust for the people of Ghana. You are the beneficiaries. He has a fiduciary relationship with you, and he has to discharge that responsibility. Do you have it?
Yes, I have it. I just want to re-emphasize the fact that when the finance minister keeps trying to create the impression that Agyapa as designed will more or less be valued by the stock market, he's not allowing the facts to speak for themselves. I mean, the agreement is very clear. There is a share subscription. Somebody is buying the rights even before you go on the stock, you go on the IPO process. So there is no doubt whatsoever that the valuation is cast in concrete in the contracts. And I'll put it on the screen so you can read it for yourself. You can take a picture, you can read it for yourself. Right. So there's no room in this analysis that allows you to make the case that the market is wise and the market will make the valuation work. Secondly, we know also that there is no effective term, which is the point that Ben has already said. Based on how much gold gets produced in those areas, if we discover 10 times more gold, Japan makes 10 times more money. So this is really problematic. Next, if the finance ministry believes that the way to maximize our mineral resources is to get more Ghanaians to own assets, then the simple thing to do is for the $300 million that they are earning, $200-something million to $300 million that they'll be earning going forward, they can invest that in equity in smaller scale projects and invite Ghanaians in on convertible debt basis so that we have equity in those areas. You don't need a convoluted structure hosted in a tax-free jurisdiction, a tax haven, listed on the stock market, etc., etc. None of that add anything. The fundamental goal that you want to put in money into equity holdings in the industry. Why do you want to alienate the little we have in order to create room for some investors who sit in London and are controlling London to come and own this year?
All right.
Another point that is so important is maybe last point. If they really want to insist that the entity that is in London will still be controlled by the state of Ghana, and therefore the rest of our equity that will be in that entity will benefit Ghana, then there are options that the London Stock Exchange itself allows for that kind of control. The sovereign listing options, where you can create a sovereign controlled commercial company and list them. Why did they not use that option? That tells you that the ultimate aim of Agyapa is to alienate the national ownership, put the ownership of the structure in the hands of investors who are favorable to the people that are structuring the deal. So unless the people who have been indicted by the special prosecutor are not longer involved, CSOs are going to view what they do with extreme prejudice, because the special prosecutor was very clear that the purpose of the transaction appears to be to turn it over to the promoters what is actually at this stage Ghanaian owned assets.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you all so very much. This is all time will allow us. My guests have been Bright Simmons, Honorary Vice President Imani Africa, Dr. Steve Mantiao, Policy Analyst and Co-Chair of the Ghana Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, Benjamin Boache, Executive Director, Africa Center for Energy Policy, ACEP. And as always, my outfit is by Habil's Couture. You can call them 0200 84 1988. 0200 84 1988. Have a good afternoon. I'm Samson Ladi Anyanini.